What is up, people of the internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic with another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new release from Danish progressive metal band Feather Mountain. The band's new album, A Liminal Step, will be released on November 27th. Copenhagen based Feather Mountain returns in 2025 with the album A Liminal Step. The album revolves around the psychological vulnerability expressed through progressive metal, electronic avant garde, and inspiration from the world of tarot cards. In the world of tarot, the Fool is a dreamy character at the beginning of a meaningful journey. In the same way, Feather Mountain takes a musical step into the unknown through a liminal step, and the listener is invited to fall with the band into an abyss where traumas dominate and societal structures seem crippling. Each song is part of the album's Red Thread, and Feather Mountain leads the listener through a musical wilderness in their search for meaning, from the inner glow on Realignment to the emotional armor in Prayer Wall. On the album, an underlying realization emerges that we are all on a journey toward understanding and self acceptance, and a liminal step becomes a magical antidote in a world full of chaos. Musically, a liminal step is the result of Feather Mountain's experimentation with genre blending, where progressive metal elements meet electronic and ambient passages, creating an eclectic and dynamic soundscape. Heavy, off-kilter riffs melt together with passages of vulnerable vocal arrangements on a backdrop of raw synths. Instrumental, instrumental reflects the album's emotional complexity. Lyrically, A Liminal Step revolves around the struggles we have as humans, how we deal with our inner emotions, confront our emotions, and try to find hope and meaning in a complex world. Along the way, Feather Mountain explores the experience of being trapped in one's own reality and questions how we navigate as a society. The album was produced by Johan Emanuel Jorgensen, Ingolf Sebastian Schott, and Zach Christ, then mixed and mastered by Johan Emanuel Jorgensen. So, we played a track from this on a recent podcast.
Yeah, we played Sigil, the opening song.
Sigil, that's right. And I had never heard of the band before, but when I heard that track, I was like, oh, interesting. That could just pique my interest to check out the rest of this album. What about yourself? Did you listen to the single before we went into this, or?
I tend not to. We've joked about this. And when I say joked about this, I've been upfront and honest with you, in less of a jokey fashion, but made us laugh. That I very seldom listen to the tracks that you send through to splice into podcasts. Until I re-listen to the podcast, which is usually about a month after it drops. And it's usually in the run-up to recording another podcast, something like that. What the fuck did I say last time? What albums did I mention last month? All this sort of stuff. So I'm not essentially at my age just repeating the same things. And then I listen to this album. You're like, you spent 10 minutes talking about this last recording. I'm like, so I did. I listened to Sigil, and that is what got me excited about doing this album was that track. So super clean, super proggy, massive build up. It's like about a 5-minute 20 track, massive build up, and then just after the halfway mark, this kind of genty, techy, like sectional and guitars comes in, kind of Haken-esque comes in, and it caught me so unawares that my jaw kind of dropped a little bit because it was so left field but so cool. And then there was this abundance of riches in the electronics and synth work. It was just really, really, really cool done and beautifully recorded. In fact, like my thoughts at the end of Sigil from was that this might be one of the cleanest one of the cleanest songs I've heard this year. I wonder how this will stack up on the album, and I'm here to say this is one of the cleanest albums I've heard this year. The production on this is absolutely fucking immaculate. This is eat your dinner off. This is perform open heart surgery on. This is present this to a tribe that has never been in contact with humanity, and they will not get the cold and die out. That's how clean this is the cleanest surface. Like I've heard this year. I can think of very few albums that sound this immaculate when doing this much. So yeah, Sigil, you mentioned it. I mentioned it. Opening song, great track. For me, it was going to be: is this the format? Is this the template? Is this what they do? Is it going to be quiet, then weird and genty and jaggy and all the rest? Is that or are we going to get tracks that predominantly lean the other way, or are they just never going to revisit that? That's also a thing that prog bands do, and it's a bit of all three.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. What I will say is this album runs just under 40 minutes, which is surprisingly short for a prog album. But I will say that they don't really hold anything back. There is a distinct formula in their songwriting, but it's a really interesting one. And actually, I felt because of the multi-instrumental approach, specifically around the electronics, synths, and guitar work, without even touching on the vocals, there's a ton here to play with that keep you interested as a listener. So even when they are following a similar formula to quieter moment builds up to a kind of jaggy, genty midsection, the journey to get to those points is often very different, with other instruments taking prominence. And that is like very exciting because it feels fresh, even if on the third listen you can start to pick the bits. All right, you've kind of co-opted a bit of this from this song here, and then you've kind of done a bit of this here, but actually you wouldn't know without really paying attention that they actually have a kind of set template of what they're doing. The guitar work in this is very impressive. Very, very impressive. And almost a kind of humble, understated sort of way. Like, so this isn't like just recently we've talked about the new Unprocessed album, and I was like that. The guitar work is so over the top and so remarkable, yet so commercial. I don't know how they do it. Like, it's to the point that it's mind blowing. The guitar work in this is absolutely incredible. Yet it's not so standoutish or so showboaty that you'd be like, that fucking hell. Like, it just sits comfortably in the mix, given brevity and heaviness when it needs to, and then really sitting underneath the vocals for the majority of its run. You know, I'll let other instruments move around. I was shocked by how clever and angular the playing is here, and the dexterity to especially some of the heavier segments where they're really, I can imagine like their fingers having like fingers like to reach the strings. It's very, very, very well done. I would say the drums are understated here as well. Drummer is really good, but once again, not showboaty. Synth work in this is incredible. I love it. It's so varied. And so beautiful. It's almost kind of film score-esque at parts, you know, just really just adds tension, atmosphere, beauty, and the bits that it needs to. Vocally, this album is a home run. Weirdly reminded me of kind of later day Clone. You know, I've got, like, if you listen to early day, that's Clone with a K. It's kind of almost a bit angsty and a bit grunge. And now later day, you wouldn't know. His voice is so fucking clean. It kind of reminded me of that. There's a bit of the alt metal in there as well, and not in a bad way. Kind of early 2000s alt metal. It soars kind of almost effortlessly. And some of the backing vocals as well, just really, really, really well placed. I kind of almost feel like anything I say is a kind of disservice to how well the album's put together. And I don't necessarily have any dramatic negatives. I will say at the same time, there wasn't one song on here where I was like, you know, like completely just spent at the end of it. It all fits weirdly uniform and actually surprisingly easy to get into, even though the music itself is prog and, you know, is doing a lot. And I don't know if this is a combination of the songwriting or if this is actually in the way the production's been handled, but none of it feels overbearing. So as a result, this is a sort of album that you could spend a lot of time dissecting. It would also sit comfortably in the background while you do things, which is weird to see for a prog album. And when I got to the end of it, like especially after the first listen, finishing out in The Hedonist, I was kind of like, oh, it's a really beautiful, really, really, really well-crafted album. I didn't instantly go back and hit play on it, and I don't know why. The majority of the listens have been in the last 2 days for me now. So I listened to this kind of last week because we had a week off, which is unlike us. And then kind of flowed in in the last 2 days, listening to a little bit more, where I've got much more of an appreciation for the actual songwriting itself. I don't know. When it comes to the grades, I hope I can articulate a bit better. I am not blown away by this, but at the same time, I think it's a really good album.
Yeah.
I think they make this sound so fucking easy. It's like when we reviewed that Cold Night for Alligators album, and I was like, this just sounds like it's not even a stretch for them. It just sounds comfortable. This sounds like a comfortable album, but as soon as you refer to something as comfortable, people will assume that it means it's not taking risks.
Yeah.
There are risks here, for sure, in the way they've approached it. But it doesn't feel like... I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a very comfortable, very warm-sounding album, but I've got this sinking feeling that Feather Mountain have like another level which they very rarely tap into this, and I'd be curious if earlier stuff... Well, you'll be able to help me because you do your due diligence. If earlier stuff has a bit more of that jag, and that's kind of been lost in this, or if this is actually just them at their most honest, and I'm assuming things that aren't there. But yeah, this is... I mean, they are incredibly good. And this album is a great showcase for that. And I will now shut up before I get any more tongue-tied. How did you get on with this one?
Yeah, I mean, like, I was really sold on that track we played in the podcast. I thought Sigil was like incredible track, so I was hoping like this album was going to be another 7 or 8 of those. I did, before I checked out the rest of the album, I did go back and listen to the previous albums, Nidus from 2019, to Exit a Maelstrom, which was released in 2022. And yeah, there's not like huge jumps between the albums in terms of like style and stuff. They are like most definitely a progressive band at their core, you know, in terms of the style and the rhythms they adopt. But the releases have always kind of flirted with that atmosphere and clean textures and lots of melody and dynamics. You know, there's always plenty to kind of soak up on the releases. However, I would say I think this album is their most engaging album to date. And like, as I said, that starts straight away on Sigil, the opening track. It is an absolute banger. Like, might be the biggest vocal hook they've written in their career. It might be the biggest vocal hook on this album, to be honest. But I was singing that for days afterwards. Like, it is so good. I definitely got an aroma of the Contortionist on that track, and the vocal style and the melody. Kind of later Contortionist, so like Language or Clairvoyant kind of era, not early Contortionist where they were much heavier. But yeah, and musically it's very like, it's very hypnotic. Like, that main riff just kind of grabs a hold of you and just like instantly kind of locks you into its groove. And as you said, there's a couple of like hefty grooves thrown in, which come later in the track, and they kind of hint on something kind of darker and mood amongst that melody. But as an opening track, I thought it was fantastic, like really good. When that moves through into Rope Me In, which is track 2, I was kind of like, all right, okay, this is not entirely what I was expecting. Touch more percussive. The rhythm was kind of reminding me of a kind of Tool-esque kind of feel. But the backdrop to that track had this like almost kind of like 80s feel in the keys, which I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I really liked it. When I say 80s, I don't mean like quirky
Flashdance. It's not Flashdance.
No, this is not like the Human League or anything like that. I was like more kind of like a Bruce Hornsby or like even like kind of Genesis almost kind of in sound. It's more subtle, the keys, but they double down on it on that track as well, where they bring in some really nice harmonies. Again, there was a bit of an 80s thing about it, with a kind of more kind of prog character. As I said, that Sigil has an incredibly big chorus, and I don't feel like Rope Me In had quite the same size of chorus, but I still enjoyed it for completely different reasons. Thought the vocal layers were fantastic. The synth work is brilliant. I got a little hint of nostalgia from it. Again, as I said, that kind of 80s kind of feel coming through. But again, they aren't afraid to just drop in a big fucking riff like when you least expect it. And the drop towards the end of that track is huge. Like, the guitar tone is so like girthy and and metallic. They even throw in this kind of like slowish kind of blast beat as well right at the end as it kind of hits its climax, which is really cool. The third track was Lantern, and it was that point there, that moment where I was like, really just the production just really hit me. Like I just started to really appreciate that on like a
Mm.
completely different level. As you imagine, like with a song title like Lantern, you would imagine, it's maybe more kind of like dimly lit, and a touch more melancholy. But it really allows the production to shine through that track. You get these really nice kind of roomy like drum tones. The guitar chords are really like they really pop on that track with the kind of little kind of proggy tails on the end of the chord, which is really cool. It's a really great track to listen to with some decent headphones on,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's at that moment you'll hear there's a lot of kind of nuance to it, a lot of subtlety. And this band are all about subtlety. There's a lot of that through this album, and it works really well as a track on its own, but also pairs really well with Realignment, which is one of the two tracks on the album that are much shorter than anything they've done
Hmm.
in the past. Both Realignment and The Grid are both about kind of 2.5 minutes, and they're used kind of like almost kind of as kind of transitional tracks. Realignment is, I'm assuming anyway, the end of maybe the first side of the vinyl, which works really well to set up Prayer Wall, which is like kind of kicks off the second half. Could be maybe the most kind of epic sounding of the tracks on this album. There's a little kind of like, it kind of hits in an almost kind of like Gojira type way, the way it's kind of been layered up, especially in the vocals. The vocals had this kind of like Joe Duplanty kind of bellow kind of
Yeah.
about them. Also got some killer synth work on it, a little bit more futuristic on that track. And then the end of that track has a really cool shift on it from this kind of dark, like blast beat driven section that bursts through into something much more uplifting and much more full of light, which I thought was really cool. The other short track is The Grid, which is again another kind of transitional track, quite heavy on the synths. Got a bit of a kind of like unprocessed or polyphia kind of vibe in the guitar work, which then takes you on to Sunder. And that track kind of moves back into the groovier kind of genty feel that we got on Sigil at the start of the album, but with probably more interesting kind of detours on it, into like electronic sections and piano kind of intersections. Again, the vocals on this fucking unreal. The vocals are incredible
Mm.
on this.
Yeah.
Harmonies are just so well done. They really kind of elevate these tracks, but there's also enough of a kind of harsh vocal tone coming through that stops it from being, just the one tone or too repetitive with that melody. And they really lean into that kind of heavier vocal on the closing track, which I maybe wasn't expecting to be as heavy given the song title, the hedonist.
Hmm.
But they do kind of weave in some like cool kind of ambient parts, just to add like a little bit of balance, and give the track that bit of ebb and flow, which can be said for the full album. Really, it has got a really good flow to it. These tracks do transition really well from one to another. Never really feels like they take the wrong path at any time. And I think that highlights the kind of level of songwriting they've accomplished on A Liminal Step. I think this is by far their most cohesive, most kind of thought out kind of album in terms of the kind of overall composition, but also the most rewarding. I feel like every time I listen to this, I felt like I liked it a little bit more. It's one of those albums that, as you say, is quite subtle, and you maybe they're not being overly flashy, but there's
Hmm.
when you actually listen to it, you think it's really impressive actually what they're doing. Also got a couple of tracks on here which have some of their kind of biggest hooks, to date as well. A bit more kind of individuality in there as well throughout the tracks, which yeah, I think maybe the previous albums were maybe missing a little bit of that, just that kind of individuality in some of the tracks, just to make them kind of stand out a little bit more. But I felt like it was like a good handful on this release that stood out much more than on past releases. Yeah, I think it's a really cool album. I kind of agree with you in the way that it's maybe not like the most exceptional prog album that I've heard in 2025. But there is something still quite rewarding about it as well that I quite enjoyed.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a weird one to kind of describe. But yeah, production's fantastic. Like a really kind of lean into that the kind of highlight of the production here. The quality of the recording is really really good. Yeah, I'd love to hear what these guys do next. I do believe, like you said, that they probably have another level that they haven't maybe touched on yet or gotten to yet. So yeah, let's see what happens next with these guys. I'm definitely interested to hear where this goes. Final thing, scores for a Liminal Step. What you scoring this one?
I mean, like I said before, it doesn't have that it factor for me, but there's no way I could mark this lower than a 4.5. I think
Mm,
it has everything.
yeah.
And like I said, it's maybe one of the cleanest, most unassuming albums, which has so much depth I think I've heard in a
Mm,
while. So yeah, that's where I'm landing in.
nice.
4.5 for me.
Nice. I'm got a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. But I do think there's more. I think there's more to come from these
Yeah.
guys. It's one of those bands, one of those albums you hear and you go, yeah, this is really good, but I feel like you could go a little bit further maybe on the next one. So I'm looking forward to hearing, whatever they do next. But in the meantime, check this one out. If you're into kind of progressive music, you like, bands like Leprous and Haken and Karnivool, or even like a little bit kind of lighter end of Contortionist, then definitely give this one a listen. A lot to enjoy in this one. Yeah, Feather Mountain out on November 27th. Check out the links to the band, have a listen, see what you think. I'm happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That's the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Catch you on the next one.
Bye, everyone.